Dr. Rachel Spaeth, and we are at the National Clonal Germplasm Repository Unit in Davis. And today I'm going to teach you how to do chip buds on almonds. There's two different species that we're working with right now. Prunus bucolica is a wild relative, and Prunus stolcis is the common almond. And so the buds came from a breeding program at Utah State, and this breeding person retired, and so their collection was not going to be utilized anymore, and someone had done a really nice genetic panel on them to see how distinct they were from the ones in our collection. So we picked 10 that were the most genetically distinct from our collection so that we can increase the diversity within our collection. So when I requested this material from people, we wanted something that could be shipped overnight, and we wanted things that were labeled. I gave them a specific list of the accessions that I wanted, and they sent me these bags that were a Ziploc bag with the ID of the label on there. I wanted at least 6 sticks. Of those 6 sticks, we're going to be picky and choose the top 3 or 4 that we're using for grafting, but it's always better for us to have more material than less material, because these are things that will not be collectible again from the location that we got them from. So they ship them to us overnight, and then after we receive them, before we can open them, they have to be inspected by our local ag inspector to make sure that we're not getting viruses or diseases. And that's really important in the prunus because there's a lot of stuff that we don't want to have shared with us. So then the ag inspector comes, they open the box, they sign off on it, and then we know that we can start attacking that. Also, whenever somebody is giving something to us in the collection, we have passport information that we would like to have. So where it was collected, who collected it, what other information they might know about it, if it's a variety that's has a little descriptor associated with it, that's great, or if there was genomic data that was taken that we can link to, that's also useful information for us. We are going to put our almonds on a Nema Red rootstock. Nema Red is a peach rootstock that's resistant to nematodes, and it is pretty receptive of almonds. The other rootstock that we often use is Krimsk 86, but I don't have that one today, so that's not the one we're going to use today. We will do 2 chips and a cleft on each accession, and we're doing that to kind of just hedge our bets to ensure that we're going to get success on something. We are using summer budwood cuttings right now because that's what we had available, and on our summer budwood we have to be careful when we're looking at these to make sure that we're grafting buds that will be successful. So there's 2 different types of buds that you'll see on these. One is a little tiny triangle shape that will be a vegetative bud, and that's the kind we want. The other buds have started to differentiate a little bit into a new leaf structure, and on the sides of those there will be little clusters that will form flowers eventually. We don't want flowers, we want vegetative, so that's what we're going to focus on. These cuttings were taken recently, so that's why we're calling them summerwood, and almonds work a little bit better if you graft them in the summertime than in the wintertime. Although you can take dormant cuttings from almonds, but usually you want to wait until your rootstock is pushing leaves and graft them in the summertime, sometime between June and the end of August or early September, depending on what your climatic conditions allow. These rootstocks are Nema Red. They are started from seed instead of from cuttings, and they've been in this pot for about a year, maybe 2, so that we have a significant enough diameter for them to be receptive for our buds. We're going to start off by decapitating this rootstock and then disbudding the buds that we can see on here that exist from this rootstock so that we can prevent a little bit of suckering. It'll still sucker, but we're just kind of minimizing that a little bit. They've been trellised to try to keep them straight. Sometimes they get a little floppy. So here we go. We are going to decapitate this rootstock and then pull this out. And then I often will clean out the top of this with any junk that's left behind. So all of these bits and pieces of leaf material, we don't need that. It'll just create fungi and problems. Okay. And now here are the little buds, and we're going to pick those off. You could do it with your fingers, you could do it with your knife, whichever way seems to work better for you. Okay. Now when I feel along there, I don't really feel too many more. They will still sprout, and the thing that's nice about using Nema is that it'll be a red leaf and the almond will be a green leaf, so you can tell the difference between your rootstock and your scion really easily when your buds are forming. Okay, So now we're going to put it on the operating table. And we are going to select a scion. We are going to look for buds that are nice and plump, like this. Since this is summerwood, we have this lovely leaf petiole, which acts as a little handle so that you can hold on to things and not get your finger oils all over the inside of your chip, and that's really nice. I would contrast that with this one. This is a bud that I wouldn't want to use because it's already started to differentiate into a new stem with new leaves, and eventually it'll be a short shoot that makes little flowers. So, good. Okay, now we're going to cut a chip. So when we cut a chip, the first thing we want to do is we want to make a little shelf at the bottom and then a little slice at the top. And I like to do the chip first and then the rootstock, so we'll just start with it here. I'm going to go down a little bit like this and then pull up. You might have to wiggle when you get behind that bud. Okay, and now I have a lovely handle with a lovely little chip. I have this little shelf here with a little bit of green cambium tissue here. The cambium is the part that we want to line up because that's going to make the new vascular connections. If I look at the back side of that, same sort of thing. We want all of this green wood to make a nice connection to our rootstock. Okay. So now I place it next to my rootstock, and that makes it so that I can see how big I want to cut my chip on my rootstock. I like to work in between two nodes so I can see there was a little bud here and a little bud here. This is a nice long inner node, so that's going to be a good space to put my new chip. Kind of slice down like this, and then up from the top. And now, when I pull that off, I've got a similar sort of thing where the green wood is all here. There will be green wood right underneath this little flap, and this little piece will fit right underneath that flap. I'm going to slide that in, like that. And usually when I do this, I always end up cutting it a little bit short. So I use this, I line it up, and then I can come back with my knife and just make a second cut up there so that it lines up and gets really nice and flush with that. Okay. And there we have it. Now our chip is in place on my rootstock. Now we have to stand it up. So this is my fancy tool. I use a big cinder block, and that holds it in place nice and tight for me. And there's two different products that I like to use for wrapping this. The first is Buddy Tape. That works pretty well. Or I was a lab rat for many years, so I use laboratory grade parafilm, which you would use for sealing Petri plates. Either way, it's a decomposable wax product. This Buddy Tape comes off in little strips that are perforated, and I start off by warming it a little bit in my hands, and that's going to make it extra stretchy. Helps if you dance. And then you can give that a nice pull. Makes it extra stretchy. We're going to start from the bottom and work our way to the top. When we start from the bottom, it cinches it in that little nest spot that it made. We're going to go under the petiole, and then we're going to go over the petiole. And that makes it so that we can see where our bud is on here. Although with this one, you can see that the wood of the scion is green and the rootstock is brown, so it's a little easier to tell than with some of the other prunus. And then we'll go back down from there. Kind of cover it a little bit. The whole goal here is to make sure that this isn't going to dry out. These products, the little bud will just grow right through it, and eventually it'll degrade in the sun. So it's really useful. And either way works with the Buddy Tape or the laboratory grade parafilm. The laboratory grade parafilm is a little bit, I think it's a little easier to work with. It's less brittle whenever you're stretching. After this, we will wrap it with a rubber band, but I'll show you the rubber band afterwards because I'm going to put a second chip on the side here, and then we will put a cleft on top, and we'll use one rubber band to wrap the whole thing. So now we're gonna do a cleft graft. A cleft graft, you're making a little pizza wedge on your scion and a little inverted spot on your rootstock. And then you're gonna just put it in there and it'll line up a little bit differently. So we're looking for something that's gonna be a little skinnier in diameter towards the tips, but I'm making sure that I don't have the apical tip on here. Apical tips are full of hormones that suppress side branching and also would encourage growth to go up, and we want this to really form a solid vascular connection below. So we want to get rid of those hormones. So we decapitate the top to get rid of the apical tip, and then we're going to cut so that we have a nice long internode to work with down here in this space. I make it a flat cut because we're going to make a little like screwdriver piece. And then I'm going to hold this kind of in my chi center here, and I'm going to use my knife and I'm going to slide like this, and I'm going to slide like this. And you'll see that as I kind of whittle this down a little bit, that it's going to be wider on one side than on the other. And I want to kind of get down as skinny as I can, and then I'll talk about why here. Sometimes when you're making a cut, you'll end up with a weird little bulgy part like that. I just usually trim that off. So see how it comes down and then kind of tapers out like that? I'll just take a scissor and just slice that right off. So now we're going to try to line up this green layer here again. And this side is going to be the only side that's really forming connection. Everything that's on the inside with our rootstock is going to be dead wood, so it's not going to heal into that space. All of our living tissue is right here on the edge. So now we have our scion prepared. Let's go prepare our rootstock. We're going to make a fresh cut up here again, and I'm going to go right below the node this time so that I have a nice long internode to work with here. And then this is the very important part, hand guard. So a hand guard, you can use a blank CD, works really nicely. Anything that has a pretty decent sized diameter hole, these were just rounds that we cut a hole in. So I'm going to put that over here, and this is going to protect my hand when I come down with my very, very sharp knife so that I'm not going to cut my hand. Made that mistake before. It's not a fun day. So we're going to go straight down the center here and just kind of rock it back and forth, and we're going to go down a couple centimeters, about an inch, and then we're going to pull that part out again. Now on the back side of my knife, I have this lovely spreader tool, and the spreader tool is going to make it so that I can split this open and slide in my tender green shoot. So I'm going to pry that open there, and I'm going to slide that in. And then when I pull that out, I want to make sure that I don't see very much light coming through here on my rootstock, because I want this part to be really tight. If it's not completely tight, that's okay. We're going to cinch it shut with parafilm and with a grafting rubber band. I'm using the parafilm because I want something a little bit extra stretchy. I cut off a square from my big piece. Then I like to fold it in half and do the same thing where I'm warming it up in my hands. And this is going to give me a longer stretch than the buddy tape did. So I can get a really nice, long, steady pull. And again, I'm going to start at the bottom and then work my way up towards the top so that it cinches very tightly closed around that graft union. If you have a little bit of light there, you can pinch it while you do that, and that'll hold it really nicely in place. And I'm going to wrap the entire scion because I don't want it to dry out when I move it to the greenhouse. It's okay if those petioles get wrapped up in there, they'll fall off eventually. I'm not worried about it. I often leave 3 to 5 buds at the top if I can. If they're really, really close together, you might end up with like 7. If they're really far apart, 2 or 3 is fine. So now we're going to take a grafting rubber band and we're going to wrap the entire thing starting from the bottom and then working our way to the top. So I'm going to start here at the bottom. We're going to go below and above each of the buds, and then we're going to go all the way up. Grafting rubber bands are special because they have a UV protectant on them, so they won't degrade quite as fast as like your broccoli rubber band, but they will eventually, if you wrap it too tight, you'll have to cut it off to make sure you don't girdle your plant, but for the most part, they'll kind of grow through it. I'm pulling really tightly as I go, and I'm kind of overlapping just a little bit. This is going to give me really, really close contact between my scions and my rootstock to prevent them from desiccating and drying off. Sometimes that can be important if you're using something that's really sappy to keep them from bleeding off, and sometimes you need to actually make a second cut so it has a space to bleed out. These ones aren't too sappy, so we're not really worried about that. So I do this technique for all prunus: apricots, cherries, plums, peaches, nectarines. But I also do this technique for apples, pears, avocado, cherimoya. The step that's very important is to make sure that your tools have been sanitized between use. So this is 91% isopropyl alcohol, and I'm gonna spray my knife and I'm gonna wipe it off. This is gonna do two things. One, it's gonna kill any viruses or bacteria that are on there, and two, it's gonna get rid of all the sap that was on my knife so that my cuts are really nice and straight. Lastly, it's very important to tag your plants so that you know what they are when you come back to them later. I like to write the date on the back of mine, and I use grease pencil because it doesn't wear off in the sun. This is really important because you need to know how long you're waiting for to see results. With some grafts, they'll show you results in as little as 2 weeks. With others, it can take, 6 months. So this one was grafted at the beginning of July, and it's another almond. We can see here that the chips didn't take on this one, which happens, but that's why we did our insurance policy of also doing a cleft on top. So there's 3 opportunities for this plant to be successful. And after a month and 2 weeks of growth, so like 6 weeks of growth, we have a whole new plant that's starting to form.